everyone, I'm Brianna from Brianna's Bookshelf, and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you're having a great week. Since we are firmly into 2025 now, I wanted to hop on the trend of 25 books for 2025. So today we're going to talk about some of my most anticipated books, as well as a lot of books that are on like my physical TBR backlist. Books that I've had for a long time that like just really need to get read this year. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm going to start off with the books that I already own, those books that are on my physical TBR that I absolutely have to read this year. And then after that, we'll get into the books that I don't yet own and then some new releases as well. Starting off strong, this is probably the book that has been on my TBR the longest from this list. This is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. So if you don't know what this is about, this follows a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins and his adventures and journey. I think that's all I really need to say. This is super iconic. You probably already know the plot. You've probably already seen the movie. Now, I have already read the full Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read that quite a few years ago, and I freaking love that trilogy. I really want to read it again soon, but somehow I've never read The Hobbit. I don't really know how that happened, but I do have this copy that my boyfriend had from childhood that is now on our bookshelf, so I need to read this so I can get a little bit more in tune with what Bilbo's story is. I've seen the Hobbit movies, but only like one time. I'm really not that in tune with this one compared to the Lord of the Rings. So I'm excited to finally learn more about this story. All right, another book I need to read this year is The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is the book 2 in the Poppy War series. Now, the Poppy War was one of my absolute favorite books of 2024, a 5-star read that I was obsessed with, and I absolutely need to finish the series this year. Like, it just has to happen. So we're gonna read book 2. I'm gonna read book 3 too. If you don't know what the Poppy War is about, it is a fantasy series that is following a warring nation and a girl named Rin who has gone to school to train how to be part of the military, and now she is in the military, and we're just kind of following what happens and her personal connections and the people that are in her kind of section of the military with her. And this is a super heart-wrenching series. Can't wait to keep going. This is for sure a 5-star prediction. I just know the whole series is going to be 5 stars. Another book I want to read this year is A Lesson in Vengeance. Excuse the half price of books label that's still on this. I need to take that off. This is a young adult dark academia book, and to be honest, I really don't know much more about it, and I don't really have a desire to know much more about it before I read it. I kind of want to go into this blind. I feel like I heard a lot about it like a year or two ago when it came out. Haven't really heard anything since. I know I was really excited about it then, and I definitely want to read it because it's been on my shelf for a while, and I think the cover's super cute, and I love dark academia. Another one from my half-price book haul that still has the sticker on it, If We Were Villains by ML Rio. I have wanted to read this for like so long. This is another one that's been on my TBR forever. This is another dark academia book. I don't know a ton about it besides I believe that it focuses on Shakespeare as like the topic of study that these students are focusing on. So I'm not sure if they're actors or like English majors, but I do know that they focus on Shakespeare. And this is compared a lot to The Secret History by Donna Tartt. And that's one of my favorite books of all time that I'm just obsessed with. So I have a pretty strong feeling that I'm gonna love this one as well. And this just gets a lot of hype, and so I'm super excited to jump into it. Moving along with the dark academia theme, this one I actually got pretty recently, but I'm just dying to read it. This is An Academy for Liars by Alexis Henderson. This is a 2024 release, and this is actually a special edition. This is the Evernight edition, which Evernight is a part of Illumicrate. It's Illumicrate's horror subscription box, so they release one book per quarter in a special edition. Now, I think this one is more than just horror. I think it's like a fantasy, dark academia, horror. I'm not sure if there's romance involved as well, but I've heard that this spans quite a lot of genres, And to be honest, I don't know a ton about it other than the fact that it takes place in an academic setting and that it does span those different genres. But I'm super excited, and I think the cover on this one is stunning. Really cool. I love the different colors. And the edges, the sprayed edges, they match, of course. And then we've got like this gilded Ouroboros on the back with a quote. It's stunning. I can't wait to read this just because it's so pretty, honestly. Like, I need to get into it. Another more recent release, but one that I'm super excited about, is The Paleontologist. I believe this was also released in 2024. This is a horror book about a paleontologist. This has to do with dinosaurs. Basically, this guy works at a museum and he leaves for a while, goes and does other stuff, and then he comes back to work at this museum and he starts to hear strange noises, see strange things, and yeah, there's gonna be dinosaurs involved. It sounds like a fun time. Sign me up. Okay, next we have Eileen by Tessa Moshfegh. If you have never read a book by this author, it's basically just vibes. Like, there's not usually a super strong plot that you could get from the back of the book. It's kind of just following a woman and her different emotions and her weird lifestyle. At least that's been my experience with the other books that I read by this author. I want to say this maybe has something to do with aliens, but don't quote me on that. Now we have a rare nonfiction pick. I'm not a big nonfiction reader, but I want to read more of it. And a topic that is really interesting and important to me is the environment and environmental protection. So I have been wanting to read for a while Fen, Bog Swamp by Annie Proulx. This is just talking about the importance of wetland ecosystems and kind of the history of their degradation in the United States, and hopefully what we can do to improve it. Wetland ecosystems are super important to regulating the climate and our clean water supplies, so I definitely need to read this and become more educated on the topic. Here we've got Tender is the Flesh. This is a cannibalism book. At the end of last year, I randomly got super interested in books about cannibalism, and I think it's because I was like watching YouTube videos about like the metaphor of cannibalism in like literature and film, and I don't know, I just find it super interesting. I believe this is about a world where people no longer eat animal meat, so they start to eat human meat, and there's like human meat factories. This is a horror, and I've heard it's quite gruesome, which is also what I've been in the mood for recently, to be quite honest. So I can't wait for this. Following the cannibalism vibes, Bones and All by Camille DeAngelis. This is the movie tie-in cover. In 2024, I did watch the movie of Bones and All, and I was so obsessed with it, which is maybe says something about me. What it says, I don't know. But Bones and All is basically following this young girl who's in high school, Marin, and Marin from the time she was a little kid has been what they call an eater, which is someone who wants to be a cannibal or feels like compelled towards cannibalism. And she kind of has to strike out on her own, and she ends up meeting another eater on her way, and they kind of go through life together, surviving for a little bit, going from town to town. And I feel like the movie, like, it's definitely about trauma and like honestly like all sorts of themes, but it's also kind of this like young love story, which sounds really fucked up because it's about cannibalism, but I was freaking hooked by it. I was rooting for this couple. I cannot wait to read the book. I am kind of obsessed with Bones and All now. Yeah, again, what that says about me, I don't know. Next up, we've got Annihilation by Jeff Vandermeer, and I'm just gonna show y'all. Stunning! This is the new cover for this. This is a trilogy of horror sci-fi books about I think climate change, or it's like eco horror. So far in the future, these people I think are on Earth, but there's like a part of the Earth they can't go to because, I don't know, some kind of ecological disaster has happened there, something like that. But yeah, it's like eco-horror, nature fighting back. I'm obsessed with the new cover. I've heard amazing things about this trilogy and it sounds super up my alley, so I cannot wait to get into this. Next, we've got The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is the follow-up to The Serpent and the Wings of Night. So this is going to be the completion of this couple's story within this world, and then there's going to be further duologies following other couples, I believe. So we're following our main character, Araya. I don't want to spoil this series for you because this is the second book, but in the first one, we're following this human named Araya who lives in the vampire world, and she is kind of the adopted daughter of this vampire king, and she doesn't want to be a vampire anymore because she feels like she constantly has to be protected in this society and she's not allowed to go anywhere by herself or do the things she wants to, and she just wants to live her life without being in fear. So she enters this competition where if she wins, she'll be able to have like whatever wish she wants granted. So she enters hoping that she can become a vampire, but she is the only human in this competition filled with very dangerous, very powerful vampires, and we're going from there. It's a great time. Fantasy romance, love it. Loved the first one. I can't wait for this one too. Okay, by now y'all are probably sick and tired of hearing me say that I can't wait for books, but here we go with more books that I can't wait for. Next up, the category is books that I don't own but that have already been released. So books that have been on my TBR, already been released, but I don't own physically yet, and I'm either probably gonna read on my Kindle or hopefully acquire these books soon. So I really want to read the Zodiac Academy series, or at least the first one. I've heard so many mixed things about this series. If you haven't heard about it before, it's basically, I believe, following an academy of fae and maybe other creatures with all these like 20-somethings that go to this academy to maybe learn magic. I'm not really sure, but I've heard that it's like a very dark romance vibes in a fantasy setting, and that the first book is a bully romance. I've actually never read a bully romance, so I'm not really sure if I would be into it, but I kind of feel like it could be a good time. And it's a pretty long series. Like I think there's like 10 books or somewhere near that amount. So I'm a little intimidated to get into it, and I've also heard the writing is not the best, but I'm not gonna let that stop me because so many people love it. So many people are obsessed with it despite those flaws that I've heard about. So I decided I really want to try the first book, and this is going to be the year to do it, where I find out whether or not I am a Zodiac Academy girly. So stay tuned, I guess, to find out if I am. Okay, another book I really want to read that has already been released is The Right Move by Liz Tomford. This is actually the second book in like a standalone interconnected romance series. And now I'm not a big contemporary romance reader, to be honest. It kind of is boring to me sometimes. Sorry to romance lovers, but I need a little something else going on. But I haven't really ever read sports romance, which I know is a hugely popular subgenre. And this series gets talked about all the time when people are talking about sports romance. Now, the reason I want to read this second one is I don't believe you have to go in order, and each book I think follows a different sport. This one is about a guy who's in the NBA, and I think that would just be fun and sexy, you know, a guy in the NBA, basketball player, why not? I've heard amazing things about it. Yeah, I just think basketball romance could be a fun time. So that's where I'm gonna start and see if sports romance is for me. I really want to start the House of Devils series this year. So the first book is City of Gods and Monsters, and this series is by Kayla Edwards. I kind of heard some things about this. It's a fantasy romance series, I think a dark fantasy romance series, but didn't know a ton about it. I heard Rachel at the Raven-Haired Reader talk about it a little bit before, and then recently I've been super obsessed with watching Mariana Reed's videos, and she is obsessed with this series, so that's gotten me even more intrigued. I don't know a ton about the plot. I believe this is following a human in this kind of magical world that has different creatures, including fae, vampires, possibly werewolves, I'm not sure. But one of her friends is captured by some sort of like criminal ring group, and she is determined to get them back and save them. And Then our male main character, I believe, is a bounty hunter who goes after these criminal groups. And that's all I know about it. I don't know if they team up, I'm assuming maybe, but I think that dark fantasy romance might be the genre for me. Okay, next up we have another Carissa Broadbent book, and that is Daughter of No Worlds. This is the first book in the War of Lost Hearts trilogy, and I've heard amazing things about this series. I don't think it's as talked about as The Serpent and the Wings of Night. However, I've heard people who've read this say that it's even better, so I'm really excited about it. It is following this girl. I'm not sure if she's human or if she's some sort of magical creature. I don't know. But I do know that she was a slave and then she gets her freedom. And I think it's like a revenge arc, basically, which sounds phenomenal. And I've also heard that it's very high fantasy and that the romance is kind of a subplot, which I do enjoy. I think that it's fun to kind of just get back to the fantasy roots and have the romance kind of take a back seat every once in a while. And I think that the female main character is going to be such a badass. So I definitely want to read this one. This year, guys, I really need to read at least Heir of Fire. So this is the next book for me in the Throne of Glass series. I know I'm super freaking late to the game. Throne of Glass, I believe, was Sarah J. Maas's first published series. And I finished A Court of Thorns and Roses and finished Crescent City like years ago at this point, but I'm still just in the early stages of reading Throne of Glass because, to be quite honest, for a long time it really didn't appeal to me in the same way that her other series did. And then finally I figured I just need to give into the hype and read it, and it's kind of had a slow start for me, to be honest. Like, I'm liking it, but I'm definitely not obsessed at this point. But I've heard for a lot of people that it does get better and more immersive and that you really get sucked in later on. So I'm just gonna keep, chugging along with this series this year. Ideally, I would love to finish the series in 2025, but baby steps. So we're just putting Heir of Fire on this list, and hopefully I'll at least get through that one. All right, this is kind of random, but I definitely want to read some more classics this year. And a classic that I've really been wanting to read is Jane Eyre. I don't know a ton about Jane Eyre, but I think it's like kind of a gothic vibe, and that's really all I need to know. Sounds like a good time. It might be kind of slow, but I'm determined to make myself read this year. So Jane Eyre, me and you, I'm coming for you. Okay, so for these last few books on my 25 for 2025 list, these are going to be new releases for this year. So first up, we have Onyx Storm by Rebecca Yarros. So this is going to be the third book in the, I have no idea what the series is called, to be honest, but the Fourth Wing series. I read Fourth Wing and I loved it. If you don't know what it's about this girl named Violet who goes to an academy where she will learn to be a dragon rider, and just kind of following her and her friends as they go through this school. It's like very ruthless. There's a lot of chances to be killed, so you're really like on the edge of your seat the whole time. And she ends up meeting this guy named Xaden. Shadow Daddy Xaden, yes. He is a great book boyfriend. I'm obsessed with him and I love their romance. However, I was really not a big fan of Iron Flame. I was in the camp of people who were like, meh, Iron Flame is like, could do without it, to be honest. But the ending was crazy, so I have to continue with the series and find out what happens in Onyx Storm, and I am praying that it's gonna go uphill from Iron Flame. Because if this book is just meh, to be honest, I might not keep going with this series, but I'm praying and hoping that's gonna get better. I also want to read A Curse Carved in Bone by Daniel L. Jensen, I believe is the author. And this is the second book in a duology. The first book was A Fate Inked in Blood, and this is like a Norse mythology inspired fantasy romance, which I thought was super cool. I find Norse mythology in particular very interesting, so I really liked that book. So we're following Freya, who lives in this small fishing village, and she has a secret, which is that she has magic that allows her to be a shield maiden. She is in a marriage, a very unhappy marriage, but she ends up getting betrayed by her husband. So she kind of goes to this guy who is a Jarl, which is like this, I don't know, some kind of power in their world but he's trying to become king, and she is set to kind of serve him and obey him, but she starts to fall for his son, who is this great warrior. And yeah, it just kicks off from there. It's a fun romance, very good fantasy. I loved it a lot, and I'm really excited to see what happens in book 2. Okay, so one of my absolute most anticipated books of this year is Katabasis, or Katabasis, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, from R.F. Kuang. And this is going to be a 2025 release. We don't know a ton about it yet. However, I have loved every single one of R.F. Kuang's books that I've read so far, so I just have to read this as soon as it comes out. I think it's going to be a 5-star prediction, despite the fact that I know almost nothing. All I've read so far is that it's supposed to be kind of like a mix between Dante's Inferno and then Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. And I actually did at one point read Dante's Inferno and wasn't really into it, but that was just because the writing style did not agree with me at all. But I know it's like, you know, a very classic story, and I get like the gist of what's it's supposed to be about, which is kind of like going through the circles of hell. And then Piranesi, I loved, and I gave 5 stars. And it's like this guy who's in this kind of labyrinth world, and it's just like super out there fantasy. So to mix those two, like, are we gonna have some sort of like labyrinth in hell situation? Like, that sounds like the perfect setup for an R.F. Kuang book. Like, I know she's gonna write this so good. I cannot wait. Okay, so for the last few here, I'm going towards horror, because lately my favorite genres have definitely been fantasy and horror. So the next book I want to read, that's a 2025 release, is Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna Van Veen. Now this one I actually do have an e-arc copy of from NetGalley, so I am hopefully going to be jumping into this soon, and I believe it's going to publish in March. This is about this girl who has a twin, and her twin has some sort of mysterious sickness, and it's kind of like going crazy, and then her sister wants to know and like find out what is wrong with her and try to help her, but her sister just continues to unravel into madness. And I kind of think from the synopsis that there might be cannibalism involved, so maybe 2025 will just be the year of cannibalism books for me. So I really want to read Overgrowth by Mira Grant, which should be publishing in May of this year. Now last year I read Into the Drowning Deep by Mira Grant, which is basically a mermaid research horror story, and I was obsessed with it. So now I just need to read Mira Grant's next book, because her writing really just knocked me out of the park and had me really hooked. And the premise of this one sounds super interesting as well. So in Overgrowth, we are following this girl who, ever since she was a child, she has felt that she doesn't belong on Earth. She feels basically like she's an alien. And then we are following her as an adult, and an alien signal has come to Earth and is being broadcast all over the news, and the mothership may just be coming back for her, which sounds like an incredible plot. The last book on my 2025 list is Another by Paul Tremblay. So I read 2 of Paul Tremblay's works, one in 2024, and actually one I just finished like 2 days ago. So I've already read one in 2025. This is going to be his new release for this year. It will be coming out in July, I believe. And what I know so far is that we're following this kid who is kind of socially awkward and doesn't really have any friends, but his parents tell him that he has a friend who's going to be coming over for a sleepover, and he's basically like, who could that be? I don't have any friends. I don't know who you're talking about. And this kid gets there, it's someone he doesn't know, and he is like very strange. That's at least what our main character feels like. But his parents are really into this other kid, and they start to obsess over this other kid and grow closer and closer to him. And meanwhile, our main character is like, maybe this isn't a kid at all. Like, maybe this is some other kind of creature. All right, so those were all 25 of my books for 2025 that I absolutely need to prioritize reading this year. Thanks everyone for hanging out with me. I really appreciate you being here and having this community to talk to about books. I can't wait to see what is in store for my reading journey in 2025, and I will talk to you all later. Bye everyone.